Because yesterday, Kevin Hall announced that he's leaving. He's stepping away from his work at NIH, taking the early retirement offer, he writes. Unfortunately, recent events have made me question whether NIH continues to be a place where I can freely conduct unbiased research. Specifically, I experienced censorship in the reporting of our research because of agency concerns that it did not appear to fully support preconceived narratives of my agency's leadership about ultra-processed food addiction. Kevin Hall, 21-year veteran researcher in nutrition and metabolism sciences at the National Institutes of Health, joins me now. Dr. Hall, it's great to have you. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks for the invitation.
Let me just start by asking about what your life has been like at NIH. My sense is that you've liked the work a lot and you found it very rewarding to do the research you do. Is that how you would characterize it?
Yeah, it's been my dream job. I've been there for a long time. I've focused on various different aspects of nutrition and metabolism. And in recent years, I've focused on ultra-processed foods and what is it about diets that are high in ultra-processed foods that are driving diet-related chronic diseases and trying to uncover those mechanisms. You know, to be fair, it's actually been a struggle over past administrations to do this kind of research in a rigorous fashion. We're one of the only places left in the country that can admit people to a hospital, keep them for many weeks and months at a time, and control every aspect of their food environment. But it's a very slow and painstaking process. We can only admit a couple of people at a time, and to do a study that takes many, many years. And so when I heard that, you know, even before the election, there was this bipartisan support to find, you know, what are the causes of diet-related chronic diseases? Why are we having these epidemics of obesity and diabetes in America? And trying to understand the real physiological mechanisms, I was excited. I thought, you know, finally, we'll actually have the resources to do these studies much more quickly and deliver answers to the American people in a fashion that they deserve. And unfortunately, I experienced some hiccups along the way in the transition.
When did you first sort of have something that was a red flag or felt like something was amiss?
Yeah, so in 21 years at the NIH, I've never been denied the opportunity to present our science at a scientific conference. And I had the opportunity to do so at the beginning of this month. I had an invitation that I tried to clear through the normal process at the NIH. And it was highlighted that this was a topic of interest to the agency. And so it went up to a higher level at Health and Human Services, above the NIH level. And it was denied. And at first I thought, okay, well, this is maybe just because there's a travel pause, and the organizers of the conference invited me to do it online, just a virtual presentation. And then that was denied, and no reason was given. And that was the first hint that something might be amiss.
That had not happened to you before. You said in 21 years, it's like that's part of what you're a scientist. You present research. This gets denied.
That's
and then
part
there's
of my job.
then something else happens with a portion of a paper, as I understand it, that they wanted you to remove.
Yeah, so I had been working for about a year or more, actually, with various university scientists around the country to prepare a really comprehensive review on what we know about ultra-processed foods in various aspects. And part of the paper was written by a colleague at a university on health equity and how these foods are, you know, being targeted to underprivileged communities and why this is a potential problem. And I put the paper through the usual NIH process of getting approval to have this paper submitted for publication. And it actually went through the process until the very next day, where it was flagged that because of this description of health equity in the paper, that would have to be edited to comply with executive orders, or else I would have to remove myself as an author. Now, I didn't write that section. I wasn't going to censor my colleague, and so I voluntarily removed myself as an author. Again, that's the very first time that's happened to me in 21 years.
So this is a portion of this paper that was written about health equity where there's obvious disparities here. We know this in terms of processed food and who's consuming. I mean, this is not like some invented notion. You take your name off so it can be published. And then you had a study. This really struck me. So you had a study about basically the mechanisms of what we might call addiction and processed foods. And you came to an interesting finding on that study. Tell me about what happened with that study.
Yeah, so this was a paper that was already out the door. It was going to be published when the new administration came in. And we'd actually prepared a press release within the NIH to discuss this paper. And what we were interested in doing was understanding when people consume ultra-processed foods, do they really hijack the brain's reward system in a way that we know addictive drugs do, like drugs like methamphetamine or cocaine. They cause this really large increase in dopamine in the brain. And so we decided to test, does the same thing happen with ultra-processed milkshakes that are really high in fat and sugar? And so we designed this study that took many, many years. It was the largest study of its kind, the most well-controlled. We actually had people admitted to the hospital for several days to control their diet in a way that had never been done before. And we published this result, which was interesting. It seemed that these foods, while they may be addictive in many people, didn't cause the outsized increase in dopamine that many drugs that are highly addictive do. And it really challenged some of the narratives behind how these foods actually work to change your brain chemistry. And so that was the main conclusion of our paper was, yeah, these foods might be addictive in many people, and we really need to understand that better, but it's probably not working in the way that many of us thought it was working in the past. So that paper was due to be published, and it was published. And we had a reporter ask for an interview to discuss the findings of that paper for a piece that she was writing in the New York Times. And that interview was denied. Our press release was also quashed for no reason given. And finally, the reporter at the New York Times asked, what is it? Why can't I have an interview? I've actually interviewed Dr. Hall before. We'd really love his input on this paper. And then she actually received a telephone call from the HHS communications director asking whether or not this was really a piece about RFK Jr., because the paper didn't seem to fully support the preconceived narrative that ultra-processed foods are addictive. And so I was shocked to hear about this. And after that conversation, the reporter was given the ability to ask written questions, to which I responded to those written questions through our press office and gave approval to some slight edits about whether drugs were drugs of abuse or addiction. And then what I saw was fascinating, because the responses that were then sent to the reporter had been edited, trying to downplay the study, saying it was very small when it was actually the largest of its kind, and that the participants had only been in the hospital for 5 days, when this was actually the only study that had that level of control. And it struck me as really concerning, because if people were willing to say, there's a little bit of daylight between our preconceived notions about even how the basic science of food addiction might work and the narrative that was going on, what is it going to be like if they want to start, actually meddling in the research itself? Yeah. That was my concern. And I actually then tried to raise that with the NIH director and RFK Jr. directly.
Dr. Kevin Hall, who is no longer at NIH. You can read more about his experience there. New York Times wrote it up as well. Thank you for making time with us tonight. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.